Episode 18 is recording now. Boys, what's going on? Stevie?
Liverpool again.
Man, you're running away with the title now.
Just give it to us now. Because I'm scared.
If only it was 10-game season.
Yeah, it'd be lovely.
But yeah, Redder, what's going on?
Praise the Lord, we won.
Yeah.
The weekend.
The penalty.
Like 1-0, but
I don't know if that was a penalty, though.
it's a penalty.
I don't know, you kind of just
debate
fell
it.
over.
Can't debate it.
With VAR, it was a bit suspect.
Just don't debate it. Please don't start this topic. Just let it go.
Alright, we'll leave it. We've got a special guest today. He's probably one of the most powerful people in Australian football. It's Tony Rallis. How you going, Tony?
I worry when you use those words.
Why?
I worry
It's
about
just a word on the street.
I worry about the ATO. I worry about all that stuff. So yeah.
We're just talking about influence. I suppose.
Yeah, I prefer that word.
Yeah.
And look,
Most influential person, probably.
thank you. I don't know about that, but I thank you. And quite impressed by you guys and what you're doing here. Congratulations to the team. He's very impressed with the centre. Very impressed with what you got in here, and a lot of good stuff happening behind the scenes in Australian football. Our friends at Oxford Street should come and have a look at what the real football people are about. And you guys epitomise that, and I congratulate you for that.
Thank you. Really appreciate it.
No, it's outstanding. Really impressed today. Really impressed.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks for joining us today. It's kind of an honour
My
to
pleasure.
have you on.
My pleasure. Real football people. My pleasure.
Yeah, awesome. So we'll kick it off. And I suppose a lot of people that don't know you're a football agent, I suppose. You're in sports management, and you have how many players in the A-League just alone?
Well, I won't break it up. I'm not sure what the mix is. It's 42 all up, both in Australia and abroad, primarily of Australian born and bred. A number of players in the Middle East, and Asia, which is something I'm really proud of. I think we as Australians have underestimated my Asian and Arabic cousins, and you know, we've lost an opportunity. I don't think it's lost, but we haven't taken on an opportunity of engaging with the fastest growing football family in the world, and that's a fact. Asia and the Middle East, something that our illustrious, highly paid leaders at Oxford Street have failed to embrace and engage. And I hope this new independent league will work towards creating proper relationships. You know, how can we be part of a street if we don't want to engage with our neighbours? Mm-hmm. And I suppose that's the simplest way I can put it on the table.
Yeah, it's a very valid point. And we'll get to more of that. How did you get involved in football? What's your background?
No different to you guys. I was a fan.
Yeah.
I have a famous saying that football in its purity came third in line. I fell in love with a very famous club in its heyday. It still exists, but a famous club in its heyday called Sydney Olympic. So I fell in love with Sydney Olympic, a player called Marshall Soper, and then I fell in love with football. But it was the first two that brought me in. Yeah. Being of Greek heritage, obviously Sydney Olympic, like a lot of people that followed Italian and Croatian clubs, like great clubs like Sydney Croatian Club, Marconi, Apia, Leichhardt, and so on. I followed them. I followed a number of players, and then fell in love with the game. Some years later, I had some initial involvement by writing bilingual columns in Greek newspapers. I transitioned into Sydney Olympic marketing, was involved very much so in the privatisation of Sydney Olympic under Nick Politis and the very famous five Greeks, and that war with Rifkin to who was going to take Sydney Olympic on. And it was a war at the time. People like Graham, people don't realise, but people like Graham Richardson and all that were involved, siding between Politis and Rifkin and taking over the club. And it was during that period that the current Sydney Roosters chairman and owner at the club, Nick Politis, said to me, what can we do to sort of put Sydney Olympic on the map? And it was always a desire of myself to bring a great Liverpool striker in Ian Rush. Mm-hmm. And we brought him out for 2 games. He actually scored his last professional goal for Sydney Olympic. Yeah, wow. And it was he some years later that said to me, are you still working for the club? And I had moved on. And I said, no. And he turned around and said, well, you'd make a great agent. So my first true international transfer was Ahmed Elrich to Fulham Football Club.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, wow.
So Ian Rush was the reason for, I suppose, the encouragement, the confidence to engage in something like that. Yeah. Mm. So Rush is the guy I say it quite often.
Yeah. Wow, that's pretty incredible, I suppose, because that was one of the big kind of transfers in that era, the golden Socceroos kind of era.
Well, Ahmed epitomised the western suburbs of Sydney, the Maryland's dream. He was probably, along with a guy called Buddy Farah, probably the first Lebanese prominent. Michael Redder, I think, was another one from Melita. Those three were the breakthrough boys, along with Abbasad. Can't think of too many others, but they were the breakthrough boys that sort of showed the line. And today, you go through the lineups of your Western Sydney Wanderers juniors in particular, and there's a lot of Arabic raised young players that will come through, I believe, confidently.
Yeah, I think that's one of the surprising aspects of it is you don't see too many Middle Eastern boys kind of coming up. And at a youth level, there's a bunch of them, and a lot of them are super talented, but they kind of never kind of gotten through. But now you're starting to see it.
Yeah, we are starting to see it, and I think a lot has to do with the fact that they were immigrants of later years, not as of the 50s and 60s of the Greek, Croatian, Italian immigration war. They came in, a lot of them through difficult circumstances. Some of my clients, like Mario Shabao, etc., came under. So it's a generation that didn't really materialise till the 90s. So we're probably going to see a major influence on Australian football from that immigration of, I believe, in the next decade.
Yeah, definitely.
I really believe that.
I think, especially the more and more of them kind of are believing that kind of dream that they can become footballers.
Absolutely.
And especially in the Middle East, they're thriving. Their football leagues are thriving. National teams are thriving.
A lot of money being spent.
Yeah. So how is it dealing with like the A-League clubs? So in the past you briefly touched on the NSL clubs?
No, I probably got involved specifically during the A-League clubs. I was obviously known within the football fraternity. I had a little bit to do with Brett Edmonton and his not so much his football management, but more so his investment side of it. Players like Nicky Carl, Jason Kalinas, Jade North, all these guys were at Sydney Olympic when I was there. So I wasn't an agent to them, but I started off a platform where there was a trust, there was a relationship. So when I got into player management, I was able to transition on the basis that there was history there.
Yeah.
So I think I was blessed in many ways. It wasn't easy. I often refer to Redder and I say to him that if this is what you want to do and this is something you want to follow, it's not going to happen in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years as your centre. You're going to reap the benefits in, God willing, in 3, 4, 5 years' time. The same with the thing. So I've been doing it now for 14 years. So I didn't just wake up overnight and bingo.
Yeah.
There it is. It's through effort, and like anything in life, it's continuity and repetitionness and a lot of trust, a lot of mistakes, and mistakes are fine if you learn from them.
Yeah. So how's it gone from when the A-League first started for you as, managing players and bringing players into clubs to like today?
Good question. When I first started, there was relationships at clubs like Con Constantine and Newcastle Jets because he knew of my history and guys like that. And, I remember sitting down and describing on a piece of paper, well, what are my connections at this club or that club or this club? And, I don't mind being transparent. At the time, I'd be lucky if I had 3 or 4 clubs that I could access at certain levels.
Yep.
Whereas today, it's a little bit different. It's a lot easier for me. There's history and there's form and there's trust. Yeah. I think that's the key, trust. And if you've got trust, even if there's a mistake or two, people trust that it was an innocent mistake, it wasn't a deceiving mistake. It's the long play too. Yep. There's over, 50, 60 intermediaries in Australia. When you consider that there's only 300 professional and scholarships, that's a lot of intermediaries. So it works out to be about 6 players each. There's a reason why 3 or 4 of us probably control 50% of the market.
Yeah.
It's about effort. It's no different to any business.
And do you think it's an industry where there's a lot of people just popping up and now we're player agents and
fly-by-nighters?
Yeah.
Used to bother me because a lot of these guys used to distort reality to young families and their kids. But now I see it as a positive because I think they get found out quick.
Yeah. And saying that, what are the kind of like the telling signs that they get
Well,
found
if
out?
I had $1 for every time an agent materialised and wanted to charge family $5,000 to go on a tour, or $5,000 come to my academy because I'm an agent and I'm going to take him to Barcelona and he's going to take photos with Messi. If I had $1 for every one of those corrupt and negligible comments, I don't think I'd have to work again. And it's a manipulation of people's emotions. It's a manipulation of families that can ill afford it. You know, people say to me, "Oh, it's all right for you. You must be charging 6, 7, 8, 10%." The reality is, I don't charge half my players, and they've got pro contracts. Does that get me offside with some of my fellow competent agents? It does, but that's my policy, my business. I'm not interested in charging the young male Altays because that's manipulation. That's exploitation. We all come from backgrounds where I'm assuming that our families had to struggle and if we keep those core principles and live our life and business life in the same way, we'll come out of it the other way. And they're the key ingredients.
Yeah, that's a massive problem. We've spoken about that a lot on previous podcasts about the selling the dream to people that aren't in a position to fund that or whatever, and then they have to find the money from somewhere, and it's disgusting that these things are occurring. And as you said, it's everywhere. It's left, right and centre. I heard one just yesterday that 10 players have been given a pro contract at a club overseas. It was like random clubs aren't going to take random players over for contracts, and these are the things. People see it and it's too good to be true, and they think they need to take this opportunity when there's nothing behind it, and it's nothing more than a glorified trip overseas.
If we put the frauds and imposters aside within our game, and there's a lot of them, I think the biggest problem is the parents, because they're allowing themselves to be exposed. I mean, I can talk of a situation. So my policy on recruiting is I get people out on the street, people that I trust, to come and tell me player X, player Y, player Z. Then what I do is I get 3 independent opinions of people I trust to work out whether that introduction's fair income or not. Then I go through the process of actually analysing whether the player is of good character, because for me, 30% of my decision is based on talent. 70% is on discipline, desire, dedication and mental toughness. Because I'll always take a player that has the 3 Ds and the mental toughness as opposed to just a talented player, because there's plenty of talent in the stands. What happens with parents, though, is it's like they have a hyperventilation of, we have to do this and we have to do that, and they allow themselves to be exposed. And I had a classic example of a gentleman who rang me and through a friend of mine. As you do, you sort of try and do the right thing by people you know, and you've got a long history, and he says, all I want you to do is get an assessment. So I said to the father, look, I'll get 3 assessments on your 2 boys, and then I'll come back to you. I happened to be in his surroundings in the suburb. I had a coffee with him. I said, look, mate, I didn't get to 3. I've got to 2. I'm not sure I can help you boys. I went through 10 minutes of a bloke who said to me, I want you to have a look at my boys because I heard you're the best, telling me I was crap. That was the first 3 minutes. Then I went through the phase of emotional distress, crying and everything. And then we got to the stage, well, I'll give you $10,000 to manage him. And that is the manipulation, the emotional, advantage that people play on innocent people. Now, those kids possibly could end up being state league players of some sort and playing with it. And there's nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that. But the manipulation and I said to him, I just got up and left. I said, mate, to take this money or to mislead you in this way is criminal, and it is criminal and against the principles, and don't ever do that again. And I walked off. So the point I'm trying to make is that a lot of people prey on that type of victimisation.
100%. Yeah.
And that's the problem with our game. That's the part I hate.
Yeah. And it's a common part of that, I suppose, player agency, or is playing the parents' heartstrings. And
well, is it just in play in football? I think it's all sports, all walks of life. Whether it's dancing, you hear it about in dancing, you hear it about in tennis, you hear it about in golf. It's just people manipulating, creating jobs, creating a false economy and false professional standings for themselves.
And do you think now, year by year, or as time goes, people are finding it harder to accept the truth?
I think so. I think it's like anything, Rita. Once you have your children, it doesn't matter how logical you are, because a lot of the people you deal with are extremely successful, logical, professional, good people. But we get caught up in the emotion of our children. And we as parents sometimes feel that we need to overcompensate that. Well, in reality, what we're doing, whether it's in football, whether it's in general life, is causing a misconception of reality and their abilities, in this case football. And I think that's where we as parents have to make some conscious, tough love decisions. And, you know, we're all responsible for how we raise our kids. Unfortunately, life these days, probably 50% of raising your children is dictated to by social surroundings, as opposed to the conventional way of raising your children.
That's right.
So, just I suppose on that, what is the process for you to, like, you know, to manage a player? You know, you said someone recommends them to you, you get assessments done, and then what are the next steps after
My
that?
biggest referral has come through my own players.
Yeah.
Yes, I have people like Reda and people across other states that will say to me, have a look at this person, that person, that person, and then I'll go through the process I mentioned before, getting independent views. My biggest kudos is my players. So when you look at my stable of players, a lot of agents, fellow agents, good young, aspiring young agents who mean well. So it's all right for you to make these comments because you've got this stable, but what they don't realise, whether it's Josh Risdon, whether it's Trent Sainsbury, whether it's Brandon O'Neill, Jack Clisby, Trent Bahaj, Anthony Caceres, I had them, and I have this favourite saying, before their mothers knew they played.
Yep.
So I didn't just pick up Sainsbury when he was an established player. He's been with me for 10 years. O'Neill's been with me for 8 years. I've seen these young men come out with ponytails to getting engaged, to proposing to their wives, to many of them having children. I've gone through that. I've lived it with them. I've gone to their weddings. I've gone to their engagements. I've gone to their christenings. Some of them have become business partners in certain other aspects of life. But that comes with years.
Yeah.
It's 14 years.
Yeah.
It's not 14 minutes.
Yeah.
And that's what everyone wants to do things yesterday. It doesn't work.
Yeah. Do you think the whole, I suppose football's grown so much, but there's so much money involved that you hear about. And this is where every parent's kind of pushing their kids to be the next Ronaldo and, you know, generate income, you know, set them up, set the family up for life type of thing. It's put a lot of pressure on children as well.
I think in some cases, I think that there's relevance to that. I think most of the time it's parents trying to overcompensate and overstate their child's ability. When we go to that elite level, there's a little bit of parents living the dreams of their kids, which is wrong and putting pressure. The system also puts pressure because we've got 1.1 million registered players in Australia, of which the 6 to 18-year-olds is about 800,000, girls and boys. And we've only got 2,000, 3,000 professional position or elite positions, I should say, in the A-League format from 13s up. So as you can see, the system's got this funnel that goes to almost zero opportunity. It's almost like trying to pick the lotto numbers. As we expand at the A-League, I think you'll find that, you know, players, I mean, again, referring to my own stable, Andrew Naboo, how could I forget Andrew, Lebanese boy, child prodigy, came through, kicked out. Joel Chinesi, I picked him up after child prodigy at Sydney FC. At Bonnyrigg, Taylor Regan, not wanted by Newcastle. I took him to Malaysia. They reinvented themselves. The rest is history. One played for one of the biggest Japanese clubs, if not Asian clubs, in Urawa Reds. The other one's a star at Perth last year. Taylor Regan's now the captain of Selangor, a very prominent Malaysian franchise. So there's players that develop at different stages. But the biggest problem we have in Australia at the moment, the difference between the old NSL and now, the old NSL would have between 14 and 16 teams with very few foreigners. And the ones that did come out resided here, ended up playing for Australia. Here we've only had 9 Australian teams if you take away Wellington,
Yeah.
with 5 foreigners. So the pathway to the strikers and the wingers and primarily taken up by foreigners. So how are we going to produce players?
Yep.
But if we get to 14 teams, the difference is 125 positions. Take away the foreigners, there's still an extra 100 positions we have to find players.
Yeah.
I said at the start of the last year on my show in Soccer Lunchtime, I said, boys, I'm estimating we're going to see 12 at the start of the season. I said we're going to see 12 to 14 young players or state league players come through. And they said, oh, what have you got at Clairvoyant? No, I said the rehashing of past players is running out of time. And what we're finding and what we're doing is they're going to be forced to give opportunities. As we grow clubs, there'll be more opportunities. There'll be more Azanis coming out of left field.
Yeah.
Matty Miller was a classic example last year. 18-year-old, let go of Melbourne Heart, the old Melbourne Heart. Chris Taylor, one of the most successful coaches in the VPL across South Melbourne, Dandenong and all that, says, mate, I need you to just really try hard. No one wanted him. No one wanted Matty Miller. Matty Miller last year, in the worst club, in the worst performing club in the history of the A-League, 9 direct assists from right fullback.
Wow.
And what a season he had as well.
Yeah.
Yep.
And all of a sudden, all the brains trust that didn't want him were arguing with me why I'm not taking him to their club.
Yep.
And that in itself is a reason why you gain credibility and respect, is if you believe in the product, you push it.
Yeah.
But you can't be pushing products you wouldn't otherwise take yourself.
Yeah.
No, I guess speaking on that note and where we're heading with this, where do you currently see the game in terms of financially, commercially, or anything really in general? Do you think we're out where we should be? Or?
No, of course not. We're tracking, I should say, at about 36% of where the potential of the game is. That's on all financial and benchmarks metrics. But I'm not also a doomsday person, because the reality is, and a lot of my people and even my blokes that do the show, they say, oh, the old NSL, we had thousands going to games. Well, the reality is we didn't. We had events that saw 5, 6, 10,000 come. We didn't have a consistent platform. And for every one of those events, we had 2 other games where there's 500 or 600 people turning up.
Yeah.
Now, we're saying the A-League's poor, and the average crowds last year dropped to 10,000. If we're in a comparison of the European market, we're finishing 8th across all of Europe, across all platforms, stadiums, crowds, memberships. We're finishing 8th, slightly behind Russia, that's got 600 million people there, whatever they've got, I'm not sure. And it's their number one sport, not in a country where rugby league, AFL, cricket are saturated with media, not to mention financial resources. So we're doing well. Where we failed is we failed to engage with our neighbours. In the biggest boom in Asian football, we didn't go to the market to get investment. I remember sitting with Gallup, concluding Graham Arnold's deal, and I said to him, mate, can you do me a favour? We need to do the roadshow. We need to get investment from overseas. He says, oh, so you want every club owned by foreigners? I said, okay. So the best league in the world is the Premier League, correct, David? He goes, yeah. I said, so how many of them are owned by English clubs or English residents? They're Russian, they're Arabic, they're whatever.
Yeah.
Americans.
Yeah.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
But no, we're too good for that. But that just showed his inability, or shows his inability, that his $1.3 million pay packet is fraudulent. It's not relative to his ability, because he doesn't get our game. So we've got a lot of upside.
Do you see that changing, though? Because we've kind of seen all these non-football people being in charge of football.
I think this independent league, where the clubs now own their badges and own their names, they can go out and actually mortgage it. We were saying last night on our show, it's like up until now they were renting the house.
Yeah.
Now they own it. And if you own it, you can make the renovations that are required, and you can borrow on that house. And that's where we're going. I mean, if you look at the history of the MLS, on the 10th or 12th year of their existence, they had similar challenges to we have. The owners got together, invested in their product, and their licenses went from 15, 20 grand to $200 million.
Wow.
That's a fact. That's not my opinion. India, Bollywood stars, cricketers own clubs. Who are the biggest investors in the MLS? NFL and baseball players. So the MLS was smart in this romance. Oh, we've got to have promotion and relegation. Well, we're not ready for promotion and relegation because we don't have the A-League fixed. My perfect scenario would be to invite an Indonesia, a Malaysia, a Singapore to come into our competition, maybe in Auckland to join Wellington, all of a sudden have a 2-conference, 20-team competition, expand their playing talent, get TV revenue by the 50 million Indonesians and Malaysians that follow the game because they're part of our competition, just like the Americans did with the Mexicans. Bringing teams like Canada and Toronto into the competition created tribalism, and all of a sudden it grew. And it grew properly. And that's what we've got to do. We've got the same challenges the MLS had. They had 3 or 4 sports, NFL, NBL, and baseball, that were saturated by media and financial support. Today, they're building their own stadiums, they're owning their own clubs. You've got someone like Atlanta, has 388,000 Twitter followers, 90,000 people stadium, coaches like Frank de Boer. And again, people say, oh, well, that's the biggest capitalist market in, yeah, I know that. We know that. But they were the biggest capitalist market when they started the MLS, but they weren't doing what they're doing now. So we have the capacity to be a 15 to 20,000 average game supporter base. We have the capacity. We've already got clubs that are spending and generating more money out of sponsorship than rugby league clubs. If you look at the Parramatta Eels and you look at the Canterbury Bulldogs, for example, well-supported clubs, they get $13 million television revenue, and they get about $5 million each from their clubs. That's $18 million. And they turn over 25 to 30, but still lose 5 or 6 million. Our 4 top clubs, the 2 top Melbourne clubs, the top 2 Sydney clubs, generate $20 million in turnover. Spend $20 million in turnover, if not 21, and generate about 16 million, and they only get 3.5 million from TV.
Wow.
So to say that it's doomsday and it's not good and it's blah blah, I mean, that's just negative.
Yeah.
That's just wrong. And forget our opinions, because everyone's got one. Stick to the facts. Facts don't lie.
Yeah, so it's an interesting point, especially when you open it up like that. I think a lot of people, they don't see the commercial aspect of...
They don't understand it.
No.
When did we have in the old... I question you guys to tell me how many rugby league clubs have $15 million facilities, just like Western Sydney opened the other day. Melbourne City is building its second $11 million training facility. Melbourne Victory is about to start. When did we ever have connections with universities? Our problem is not our clubs. Our problem is our leaders.
Yeah, 100%.
The front shop guys.
Or lack of leadership.
Complete lack of complete lack of leadership. I still remember when I brought Usain Bolt out. I didn't do it because I felt Usain Bolt was going to be David Beckham. I did it because I wanted to prove that I could get on the front page, middle page, and back page of every newspaper in Australia. I was wrong. I got on every front page and back page in the world. I didn't spend a dollar in marketing. Yet Gallup and 10 executives who cost the game $5.5 million and another 17 million for the other people that work in there, 22 million in total, were saying, oh, well, we've got no dollars to market the game. Well, if you understand the game, yes, money's important, but it's not the end-all and be-all.
That's something interesting you touched on. Did you want to tell us a little bit about the Usain Bolt situation, how that came along?
I drove up to the Central Coast to have dinner with the CEO and a few other people of the Central Coast, and I said, I have a dream. Let's bring Usain Bolt and make some real noise in Australian football. End of discussion. People say, how'd you get in contact? I said, about 300 years ago, some bloke invented a thing called the phone. And I just picked it up. So that's how it came about.
Was he serious about actually becoming...
Oh, he believed that he was Cristiano Ronaldo.
Yeah.
But of course he would.
Yeah.
Sprinter, world class,
Athlete, yeah.
making $20 million a year from Nike and all these other commercial deals. Of course he believed he was going to be Cristiano Ronaldo.
So was it the money that... The offer, the financial offer that really deterred him from playing?
He didn't make a lot of money at all.
No, that's what I mean. Like, they offered him, I think it was like 200 grand or
Yeah, it didn't
less
come
than
for that. Let me tell you that. There was bigger risk for him coming here than not coming. I know his management at the very beginning didn't want him to come because of the endorsements he had through his 10 years, one of the greatest world athletes of all time.
Yeah.
So, no, he came here for the right reasons.
Yeah. Was he disappointed at the end?
I think so. I think a little bit bitter.
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah, he's given it up now, hasn't he?
think
I
reality.
think he's on the party life now. If you watch his Instagram, he's loving the party life wherever he is around the world.
I think reality's come in, but he was a great tool, and it's a real shame. The Central Coast did a media conference, and I don't know, we lost count at about 150 journos. Do you know how many from the FFA were there?
How many?
0. The biggest marketing event in the history. They humoured me because I obviously went through them and tried to get Fox and all that, and they would effectively, I don't know, didn't believe it was possible, and there they are on front page, and smack bang in the middle of AFL and NRL finals. We were on this time last year. We were on the front page and back page of every newspaper. It was crazy.
Is it that type of short-sightedness from the FFA that you think is going to continue? This damage the game, because we're not at all. Grand final time, we're not on the front pages, we're not on the back pages. Premier League highlights even come on Fox, and it's still like 10 minutes in, even though all the other sports are in off-season. AFL's not in season, NRL's not in season. We've got cricket for like 15 minutes, and then it shows,
There's a couple of reasons for that. The first reason is, so if you're running a business, are you going to start your business by promoting the one next door? So if you're Channel 9 and you've put $1 billion in rugby league, and you're Channel 7 and Fox, and you've put $1 billion in AFL and cricket or whatever else they've done, its logic says, I'm not going to promote this sport that I'm not putting the money. Point one. Point two, it's a cultural thing. But the biggest fallacy of our game is our illustrious leaders and their failures and inability to engage, to recognise our history. They've only just started to recognise history. You can't move forward without recognising your history.
Yeah.
Good or bad.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point. In terms of our neighbours, if we look at it, one of the biggest sports channels, beIN Sports, is Qatari, Middle Eastern.
Yeah.
That's an opportunity to, I guess, sell the A-League to the Middle Eastern Asian market.
I went to China, Redo, and I spent some time. And while I don't agree that exactly what they're doing, their president came out and said, I want to win a World Cup in 20 years. So all these Chinese guys with all their cash under their beds came out. The salaries of clubs, but there were $150, $200 million total operating costs. And I went there and during the Trent Sainsbury transfer and saw a club like Jiangsu Suning. So Suning, that owned the club, Jiangsu, or privatised it. Just imagine Harvey Norman times 50, if not 100. Owns 71% of Inter Milan. So one of my gripes with the guys here is these guys are used to losing money in sport.
Yeah.
Same with the Middle East. If we did a roadshow and said, look, this is our benchmarks. We want you to spend a minimum of $15 million a year to operate a club. We want you to do this. We want you to do that. For them, it's nothing if you embrace them. And at the end of the day, if we can grow our game, even with foreign investment, and they're following the rules of what we want them to follow, what's the problem? We're the only sport in Australian landscape, only sport. There's no other sport that can do this. We can go and find 10, 15, 20 investors that could run clubs to our specifications if we engage. But see, we've got this arrogance, this arrogance of we are superior, we are the kings of Asia. We're not.
No.
How are we the kings of Asia? In what? In money? In fans? You go to J-League and it's just a phenomenal. Like when I took Andrew Naboo there, I went to Royal Reds. I accept one of the biggest clubs in Japan, but you go to training facilities and I go, I counted about 20 people. I said, 29, 30 people. And I said, geez, you've got a fair few people working. They go, no, this is just the football department. We've got another 60 working at the offices and running the commercial side.
Yep.
So those people are used to spending money, but you got to have a plan.
Yeah.
You're coming here and they're seeing Gallup. You can't spell football, let alone run it.
Yeah.
You see O'Rourke, that he doesn't know how to spell the truth. How can you... I remember people saying to me, how did you get engaged with Trent Sainsbury, and I thank the FFA for that, because Trent became a very wealthy man by going to China. But you know how that happened? Laurie McKenna rings me and says, mate, Martin Lee, a Chinese national, came out and bailed the FFA, took the license paid $5.5 million to take it off the FFA, stopped the bleeding of $2.5 million, and do you think they took him to lunch?
Wow.
So I can't thank David Gallup enough for that, because I took him to lunch, and next thing you know, the guy sitting next to me says, let's move Sainsbury to China. The reason, what I'm trying to say is, how can we engage? Asians and Middle East people are about hospitality, how you treat them. They like their bells and whistles. Treat them with a bit of respect, and they'll invest in our game. 53 million kids play football in China, 91 million in India, 18 million across Indonesia and Malaysia.
It's crazy numbers.
It's crazy numbers. Unbelievable numbers.
These are facts.
Yeah.
David Gallup wouldn't know that. Him
Of
and
course.
his bullfeds.
So you spoke about, obviously, the media being controlled by the different sports, so Channel 9 and things like that. So we seen when the A-League was booming not too long ago, then the media attacked the fans, and that was a big outcry about the terrorists and the Suburbans and things like that. Even with all that investment that you're talking about, how do you see the way around the media in there, seeing it's so controlled and it's so biased towards the other sports?
Financial muscle. Give them what they want. What do they want? So just imagine now that we had Mr. Suning spending $2 million advertising on their radio stations on TV, because he owns Team X in Perth, or Team Y in second Brisbane, or Team in Tasmania. Give them what they want. Spend money on this thing. And buy the MLS initially wasn't getting any money from TV. They were buying their content. That's the way to do it, fellas. Give them what they want. Give them their Usain Bolt story. We're on every newspaper, television, community, lifestyle shows in the whole of Australia. So give them what they want, and they'll come on board.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But again, we're old soccer. We don't know anything.
Yeah.
The old fish and chips and chicken shop and fruit shop guys that funded the first national competition of all sports. People forget that. The NSL was the first national sport of all Australia.
Yeah, wow. I didn't even know that.
Yeah. So anyway, it's of course you don't, because the bullfeds running our game for the first 3 years were telling Fox Sports commentators to make no reference to the history of our game.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and then they made them change their names from Sydney Croatia to Sydney United 58.
Yeah, all that, the flags, the colours,
Yeah.
etc.
To get rid of it.
So you can go to downtown Italy, and there's Verona Hellas, Greek heritage in Italy.
Yeah, that's right.
Tottenham recognises its Jewish heritage.
That's right. Yeah.
Inter Milan was of English presence. But downtown Australia, multicultural Australia,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's wrong. I think that's where people need to, especially in terms of the FFA, they need to understand football isn't one language or one nationality. It's across everything.
Let me ask you something. Why did John Howard go to Frank Lowy and say he's $40 million to start the A-League, or whatever he gave him, $30 million, $40 million? Why did he do that? Because he loved football? No. He did it because he realised that football's the international language of all his trading partners. Chinese, Indonesian, Japanese, whatever.
Yep.
The Liberal Party.
Interesting point.
It was
Yeah.
the Liberal Party were the guys that facilitated all this.
Yep. Interesting point.
So it wasn't even a football person that put us on the football destiny. It was good old Johnny Howard, Liberal Party, St George, cricket, tragic.
Yeah.
Why didn't he support cricket?
Yeah.
We've got a situation now where the AFL, and it really irks me,
Yeah.
the AFL fund and lose plenty of millions to send teams to play in China. Port Adelaide generates $6 million in sponsorships and alternative financial benefits through Chinese investment.
Wow.
Yeah.
I read the article on that. I think it was a couple of weeks ago. Yeah.
Yeah. So you look at the Parramatta Eels. They talk about their shift in their membership base. Indian,
Yep.
Arabic,
Yeah,
Assyrian,
yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
Well, hold on a second. Yet we don't want to engage with our neighbours. We don't want to engage in people that are happy to lose $5 million to have a football team because there's business reasons.
Now, with that independent board, right, I know we said that it's pretty much like clubs now owning their houses. Does that mean opportunities like that in terms of maybe hosting a game overseas in
Look,
China
I think
or whatever?
the independent board needs to find its feet and
Yeah.
put an infrastructure now, because they've got to set up an infrastructure.
Yeah.
I think we've got to give them that 12 months. I think they're very ambitious. I think their owners have put their money up. The only concern I have, if you look at history, whether it's sport or governments, when there's been a civil war, and that's what we've had in Australia, we've had a civil war with the FFA and the clubs, yeah? The clubs have come through, FIFA. What you find in history is that the guys that fought the war are not always the guys that run the game. We've got to pick the right people that run the operation post the war.
Yeah.
We've got to find the right balance of people. We can't let the big clubs dictate, because then they'll dictate where relocation happens, how it happens. It should be for the good of the game. And if you have a look at the MLS model, when they got to 14 teams, there was only 7 owners that had multiple teams, because they realised they wanted to control things for the good of the game. Yeah. And that's the next challenge we have. And if we get that right, we're sweet.
Yep. I guess moving on to another point, people might be interested to know. You're building an app. Do you want to tell us a little bit about it?
It's come about through the constant engagement of families reaching out, and children and young players that say, "Oh, I need an agent." You know, in 1999, little Johnny got injured. His grandmother passed away, and he's been scarred for 15 years. But if he had the right agent, he'd be a player, which is all crap. The agent can only open doors.
Yeah, that's
can't
right.
do your dancing.
Yeah.
So through that manipulation, I started doing some research and finding out that, well, how can there be 50 agents when there's only 300 players and 3 or 4 of us control 50%? So how are they making money?
Yeah.
And I started to work out they held all these fabricated tours. I'm an agent,
Academies,
come on
yeah.
tour. I'm an agent, come to my academy.
Yeah.
So Scout Me is going to be a subscription-based app where you have a choice of uploading a certain skill or a full game, or having the super deluxe one where 2 independent pro licensed coaches come out in games that you don't know about, and they scout you and they give you an independent analysis of where you are and who you are. If you come through on an aggregate score of 95% or above, then what happens is you can come into a course where we assess you and work out where you're at, and then if you come through that, then we'll take you on as a management course. But ultimately, it's about authenticizing an assessment of a player and who he is.
Interesting. Now, within the app, would it have like stats on players? So I guess
We're still in the process of building it. There's going to be reports, and we're going to model it on a certain standard.
Yeah.
There's going to be a social component to it where people can so junior clubs can go and scout, but not quite yet. We're still in the developing stage of it. But my market's not just Australia. My market is China at 53 million and India.
Yeah.
And all the rest of it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So is it like the Y Scout that they have in like Europe?
Y Scouts for professionals.
Yeah.
This is a bit more different. This is about, it's like going to a tutorial and teacher coming back and saying why the essay was wrong.
Yeah.
And where you got to improve.
So it's like an assessment for
Based on
elite young players
Absolutely.
type of thing.
Well, any young player.
Yeah.
Because the greater good for me is there's 1.1 million registered players, but there's 2.6 million that love the game.
Yeah.
I wasn't a great player, but I want to encourage the next football agent, the next football commentator, the next football psychologist, the next...
Yeah, it's a very good point. It sounds very interesting. When is that going to be?
We're developing. We're in the process of developing. We've probably got another 4 months of development, and then we've probably got another 6 months of trialling and engaging with markets and developing the right support staff around it to market and all the rest of it.
Yeah. Well, that sounds...
Yeah, it's very interesting. So is the goal of that also as well to guide the parents to say it's realistic that you need to find a manager, or it's you're not?
No, it's about guiding the parents about realistically where their kid is at what level, so they're not being misled. We, by virtue of this app, will become the highest employer of Australian coaches, where there's a major unemployment. We'll be paying them to go and give an assessment, and there'll be independent assessments by pro license or late licensed coaches.
Yeah.
And how much would the subscription be for?
We're still working on that. As you'd appreciate, It's not that simple.
Yeah.
It's because, remember, if we're paying professional coaches to go out for 2 games, we've got memorandum of understandings with the Players Union. We want to contribute funds towards player hardships. We want to partner up with the Coaching Association to support coaches and to implement coaches. So those parameters have not been assessed yet. But, we're working on those models.
Yeah, definitely sounds good. And it's that, I suppose it's that innovation that's required in our industry.
Yeah.
where
Football's growing.
It's
right?
growing,
It's
yeah. And I
massive.
think that's the thing is in Australia, especially, we're not utilizing technology. You know,
No.
like you look at here, Steve's the only person that's kind of using technology into his kind of coaching methodology to kind of improve players and give them kind of feedback immediately on how they're kind of progressing. And
Well,
it's-
the biggest thing for me is the uploading, where they are responsible to go. Forget the skill set, where the whole game's uploaded onto an app,
yeah,
and then a professional coach, can show little Johnny where he should have been in a particular moment of the game. And he can visualise his errors. No different to what Arnold, Postecoglou, Popovic do for their players. And that's the key. Rather than these academies guys that aren't teaching kids how to do runs, let alone how to understand the tactical side of the game.
yeah,
So it's an assessment. It's like a driving course assessment, saying this is where you're at.
yeah,
Because that's really interesting. Because something that's popped up more so in the last couple of years that I've started to see it is that I know one of the clubs told 13-year-olds and older at their academy that they needed to be looking for player managers and things like that. And with the growth of, you see like you were talking about, the 50-plus managers that have come into the game that are popping up left, right and centre, like players have been influenced by these kind of things and told at those ages, like, you need a manager and those kind of things. Like, what would your advice be on that for parents of potentially a talented player coming through?
I definitely don't think that any 13-year-old needs an agent.
Yep.
Unless there's Leon Messi and he's about to crack first grade at 15.
I 100% agree, but the issue from a parent's aspect, and I think that's where parents need to be a bit more responsible with the decisions they're making, is that some of these academies that are popping up, we've spoken about earlier, advertising and selling the dream that you are going to be at Man City. And
No,
stuff.
but I don't mean this was an A-League
Yep.
academy that told their
Yeah.
academy boys this year that they need to be getting managers. This was at 13, from their 13
Did they
and above.
recommend a manager with that?
That comes with it.
Yeah.
Well, there's plenty of times your illustrious partner here, Redo and others, come to me and they bring me a kid at 14 or 15, and I said, listen, I haven't got a sponsorship with Huggies yet, and I'm not interested in changing nappies.
Yeah.
I'm not suggesting, and even I have had to meet people halfway, because there is some kids at 16 that, as opportunities arise, will come. You know, the old NSL used to have a lot of 16, 17, 18-year-olds. They don't need an agent at 13, 14, 15.
Yeah,
It's just
totally agree.
So when would you say that is something they need to be considering?
Well, every situation is different. So, right here, right now, if I'm trying to recruit, I'm only interested in 2 16-year-olds. There's not too many others.
Yep.
And they're on the peripheral. They're training with first graders. You don't need a 16-year-old or 15-year-old playing under 16s. It's just a joke. It's just a fabricated representation.
Yep. Yeah. So what would moving on from that, would you be advice for the young players? So a lot of them are told go overseas, some are told to stay. What would your be advice for the players that are coming through potentially?
Every situation is different.
Yeah.
The simple facts are 85, since the early 80s, over 1,100 players, 16 and above, have gone overseas, professional or otherwise. 85% of them failed. Sure, there's exceptions, Cahill, Kill, Lucas Neal, Craig Moore, but for Mossa Malonga, for every one of those, there's 100 failures, 100, For me, every situation, the most successful, the majority of that golden generation left Australia from 19 to 22 years of age, 23. They were established, they had 50, 60, 70 games in Australia. They were established players, a lot of them had gone to Olympics. Arnold gives some very good statistics. There's been 68 Olympians, Australian players that have gone to the Olympics. 61 went overseas, 64 went on to play for the Socceroos. We haven't qualified for the Olympics, that's why we're not producing players. The pathways, come here, be the best you can be here, and go overseas on transfer. They respect you, they've paid for you.
I totally agree with that, yeah. I guess the idea of you being sold or being bought, as a player shows your worth and your value. and you tend to see nowadays. I think me and Tony got into a really good example where a very, very upcoming kid went to Spain, but he never held a European passport, and he was only 16 at the time. He was promised by an agent he would get signed. And it's just telling him that, and, you know, it's disappointing to see some kids make the wrong decisions, but, yeah, ultimately.
But what about, like, you... Because the A-League, obviously, there's only 300 players.
Yeah.
Less. You know, you kind of got to know people to get in or get looked at. So you're in NPL, you're doing well. A lot of A-League clubs don't look into the NPL, you know, how
They don't have the resources.
Yeah, but for those kids that are actually talented, you know, the 21, 22, there's still a chance for them to kind of go Europe. And it's not playing in the Premier League or whatever, but to play in, you know, second division somewhere or play in a, you know, a top 10 league, you know, between the...
If I tell you that a lot of our clubs are equal payers to the majority of clubs in the Dutch Premier Division, what would you say?
That they're equal.
In financial pay?
Yeah, I completely
So
understand.
if you take away PSV, Ajax.
Yeah. It's,
So there's a fabrication of what Europe's about. So Europe, England Premier League, yeah. The Championship, yeah. German Bundesliga 1 and 2, absolutely. The top 10 Spanish clubs, the top 6 Italian clubs, the top 2 Greek clubs, the top 2 Portuguese, yeah, no problem. The top 4 Dutch clubs. But the rest of them pay below what we pay.
Yeah.
So what are we talking about?
Yep.
So why don't you establish yourself, try and make your national teams, 17s, 20s, 23s, and go as an established player, more mature, more thinner. Sure, there is exceptions to those rules, but too far and few between.
yeah. Yeah, and that's the thing. I think that a lot of players, the expectations is, yeah, Europe doesn't pay well. You know, you're looking at €2,000 a month.
Yep.
You know, and you're playing in the second division in Holland, and that's if you're lucky, you're getting 2,000, especially if you're a young player. And even in the Serie A, like I read a stat a couple of years back, and the average wage you take away from the top clubs in the Serie A was like €40,000. And you're kind of making more in the NPL than you would if playing in Serie A, playing in the Italian Cup.
Yep.
And if you can't make it in your own environment with all the comforts of home and support and language and community, how are you going to go and compete against South American kids, Eastern European kids, African kids that have to make it to support their families?
Yep.
Yeah.
So that's the story.
Yeah, it's good insight. And I think a lot of players and parents listening to this would kind of, their education would kind of would have
Elevate,
improved.
hopefully.
Yeah, and hopefully they get a better understanding. But yeah, there's a lot of charlatans that go around selling tours and trials with no outcome. And you know, to pay to go on a tour or to pay to go on a trial is kind of, you know, it's not football really.
Yeah. Emotional manipulation.
Yeah. Thanks for being on the pod today, Tony.
Great to be there.
Thanks,
It's,
Tony.
Pleasure.
There's a football dream going.
Yeah, it was great to get your insights about it and what you've been up to and what you're doing with your new app. So we look forward to seeing that as well. Hopefully we can get you back on at a later date.
No problem. Anytime.
Guys, till next week.
See ya.
Have a good one.